Dracula is an 1897 Gothic horror novel written by Irish author Bram Stoker. The story follows the attempts of an eccentric Transylvanian nobleman named Count Dracula to move to England. The tale gained great popularity and is probably the most famous horror story in the world. However, Bram Stoker wasn't just a regular guy. Throughout his life, the author demonstrated an interest in the occult and was part of secret societies. In this sense, Dracula has many layers that may go unnoticed by those who read the story as just a simple horror tale. Firstly, I would like to warn you that Dracula is a book full of mysteries and symbolisms, starting with the name, which has a peculiar etymology. In ancient Romanian, it is the combination of two words, ul or ulla, that is a patronymic, which means the son of, and Dracul, which means the devil. At the same time, the name has Roman roots, derived from Draco, which means dragon. Another extremely important point is that Dracula is a Christian story and only works in this context, which means that it is impossible to disassociate the tale from religion. Furthermore, the book is very dense, and no matter how much I try to relay the main symbolisms present in the story, I believe that it will not be enough to cover all its meanings. Therefore, I will divide the explanation into 5 topics to make the approach easier. At the beginning of the book, we meet one of our protagonists, Jonathan Harker. He is responsible for assisting Count Dracula on his move to London. Jonathan is invited by Count Dracula to his castle in Transylvania. It is important to highlight the fact that he was invited. On his way, before arriving at Dracula's castle, Jonathan receives a crucifix from a local resident, where it seems like everyone in the village has known who Dracula is for centuries. Dracula's castle is isolated from civilization and faces an abyss. Jonathan, a man without much religious attachment, finds himself in a diabolical ambience, locked in his room, surrounded by ghostly hauntings and strange noises that permeate the night. In this situation, he clings to the crucifix as if his life depended on it. At this point, it seems clear that Count Dracula represents evil incarnate, the satanic activity on earth itself. And by clinging on the crucifix, which here symbolizes religion itself, Jonathan can somehow resist the attacks of the evil one. In his first nights, Jonathan finds himself very confused, without understanding what is happening, just as a man devoid of faith finds himself helpless in the world, falling into a kind of nihilism where nothing leads to anything. Again, only the attachment to religion, although desperately, leads Jonathan to a chance of survival. Interestingly, Jonathan is the only character to deal directly with the Count who is not injured or killed, although with mental damage. At the end of the chapter, he manages to return to London without any further problems. After Jonathan's return to London, we meet 2 other characters, Dr. Seward and Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. Seward is analyzing a psychiatric patient named Renfield. This patient is obstinate in eating insects, living in an animalistic condition imposed by subhuman humiliation. In turn, Van Helsing is introduced as a much more experienced doctor, versed not only in earthly matters, but also in spiritual ones. Van Helsing and Seward represent respectively the ancient and the modern knowledge. While Van Helsing tries to understand the spiritual and mythical side of situations, Seward's point of view is based on merely skeptical knowledge that leads him to disbelieve much of Van Helsing's statements. Later, when a character is contaminated by Dracula, Van Helsing states the following. As said, the enemy's activity aims precisely to contaminate the world, to distribute the evil. In the first part of the video, I highlighted that Jonathan was invited to the Count's castle, just as the devil himself does not invade someone's life, he tempts it. Dracula's victims are all coerced through temptation, invitation, and seduction. Dracula cannot force anyone to become undead. It is the person who must surrender to this purpose. Here it's important to highlight three characteristics of Count Dracula and his actions. The first is nighttime activity. In symbolic terms, the purest time of the day is 3 p.m., the time when Jesus Christ was crucified. On the other hand, the most impure time is 3 a.m., the opposite of the time of the crucifixion. Throughout humanity, it was understood that the night was created as a period of rest, where darkness takes over the world. Based on this, it is understandable that a diabolical being like Count Dracula maintains his activities at night and rests during the day, perverting the natural rule of things. The second characteristic is his type of approach. Throughout the tale, the vampire's victims are women and children, not men. It is known that, in symbolic terms, these are weaker and more easily manipulated axes, not because they are dumber or anything like that, but because they are technically more vulnerable. According to the Judeo-Christian tradition, it is the father's duty to protect his family. In this sense, the enemy's objective is to attack not the protector, but those protected. The third characteristic is the perversion of the sacred. Van Helsing says that Dracula only lives in holy lands. The proof of this is that when he moves to London, the Count has to take boxes and boxes of land from Transylvania to England. The reason is quite simple. As Tolkien implicitly says in one of his books, evil can only pervert things, not create new ones. Therefore, to be successful, Dracula needs to pervert sacred lands and bonds, such as family, for example. We can conclude that the Count is the antithesis of pure, the essence of evil. Seward's psychiatric patient, Mr. Renfield, the one I mentioned earlier as a bug-eater, is a good summary of demonic activity in a faithless soul. Renfield sold himself to Dracula, a guy he calls master, in exchange for favors that not even the victim himself understands. It seems the promise lies in Renfield having the power to dominate insects by eating them. The great power that Count offers his acolyte is to dominate the lowest figures in life. Such are the promises of the devil, residing in human desires, promising something so small and making it seem so big. When faced with the possibility that Dracula is no longer interested in him, Renfield decides to challenge his master, not through faith, but through the flesh. It's a kind of instinctive response to lies and fear. Renfield even declares something like madman often possesses incredible strength, admitting himself to have been mad throughout the entire period of Dracula's rule. As it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 18, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing." The message of the cross is salvation, the existence of a spiritual kingdom through Jesus Christ. The hypothesis of Dracula being an evil force, in this way a spiritual one, escapes poor Renfield's mind, preferring to reduce himself to a madman rather than admit that he was manipulated by darkness. Unsurprisingly, using only his human nature, that is, the flesh, Renfield is easily defeated and killed by Dracula. Previously, I talked about the fact that Dracula only attacks when given the opportunity, never by imposition. In this sense, Van Helsing confirms this point, demonstrating that once the door is open to the evil one, the gradual relationship before perdition is sealed. Van Helsing says that the vampire, although he can come and go whenever he wants, can only enter for the first time when invited to do so by a resident. Once again, Stoker hints at the Count's diabolical nature. Later in the tale, when the protagonists become aware of their enemy, a force to combat Dracula is created. However, once they focus solely on combat, they leave certain priorities aside. Jonathan Harker is part of the fighting league, and while he is preoccupied with the battle, he ends up leaving his wife, Mina Harker, aside. That's when Dracula attacks her. The attack occurs at the precise moment when the man values his obligations more than his family. This is such an important point that Stoker dedicated an entire chapter of the book to highlighting how diverting attention to something other than the family can leave it susceptible to harm. Finally, among the fighter's strategies is finding the boxes of sacred land from Transylvania, opening them and burying a host, sacramental bread, in each box. This is a very curious point. It seems to me to be an allusion to agriculture, where the host serves as a seed. Symbolically, the host, like the crucifix at the beginning of the story, has the purpose of showing the role of faith. Just like in conversion, a simple word thrown in the right soil can generate a good Christian and save a soul, as it generates good fruit. In this sense, there seems to be an implicit idea of conversion as the only possible vehicle of salvation against the evil one. I won't tell the end of the story, as I believe it would be ruining the experience for most future readers. As I said at the beginning, Dracula is a book of a unique magnitude, and symbolisms extends much further than I can say. For example, what is the symbolism of Mina Harker? What do wolves symbolize? Why did Dracula turn into a bat? Why not another animal? Why are 3 female ghosts, and why are they dressed in white? I have vague answers for all these considerations, but I think they are part of a more subjective vision, as they directly interfered with the analysis of the final part of the story. Bram Stoker was a peculiar fellow involved with some particular views on mysticism. Someone with this background wouldn't write a horror story simply to scare their readers. Leo Tolstoy said that there are people who pass through a forest and only see firewood. To this, Dracula may be a simple horror folk tale. For others, it is a story filled with very specific details that demand a lot of attention to the subtlety of its themes.